When I first got the job as the night receptionist at Grady's Garage on Route 666, I thought it was a joke. I remember the Craigslist ad like it was yesterday. Help wanted. Night receptionist. $22 per hour. Must not ask questions. Must follow all rules. The ad was short, suspicious, and downright weird, but I was desperate. After getting laid off from my warehouse job in Dayton, bills were stacking up faster than I could breathe. The garage was located off a remote stretch of Route 666 in rural Ohio, about an hour's drive from where I lived. Everyone in my town had heard the stories about how the road was cursed, about the disappearances, about how cell phones stopped working when you got past the cornfields, but I never put stock in those tales. Every town has its ghost stories, its warnings whispered by old folks over coffee. I arrived just before sunset for my first shift. The sky had taken on that eerie orange hue you only see during fall, right before the cold kicks in for good. The garage sat behind a rusted chain-link fence, surrounded by tall weeds and broken-down vehicles. It looked abandoned, except for the single red neon sign that blinked open like a dying heartbeat. As I pulled into the gravel lot, a man stepped out from the main building. He was wiry, probably in his late 50s, with leathery skin and a slow, tired walk. He didn't introduce himself. He just handed me a yellowed clipboard with a sheet of paper clipped to it. "These are the rules," he said. "Read them. Follow them. If you break even one, you're done." I raised an eyebrow. What kind of rules are we talking about? He looked at me like I was already wasting his time. "You'll see." With that, he turned around, got into a rusty pickup truck, and drove off down the road without another word. I watched his taillights vanish into the distance before glancing at the paper. The rules were typed out, old school style, like from a typewriter. There were 11 in total. 1. Never leave the reception booth after midnight. Not for any reason. Time 2. If a customer comes in with a vehicle that has no license plate, ask no questions. Log them in and offer black coffee. Only black coffee. 3. Between 2:13 a.m. and 3:06 a.m., the payphone outside may ring. Do not answer it. 4. If a man in a brown trench coat asks for Red Jack, tell him he already came by. Do not say anything else. If you hear heavy breathing in the waiting room but no one is there, turn off all the lights and count to 30 slowly. 6. You may hear knocking from inside the parts locker. Do not open it. Ignore it, no matter how long it lasts. 7. If a vehicle pulls in but you don't hear an engine, do not look at the driver. Slide the sign-in sheet under the glass and look down until they leave. 8. If something with hooves walks across the roof between 4 and 4:15 a.m., do not acknowledge it. 9. Keep the garage doors locked at all times. If you hear them creak open, you have exactly 12 seconds to close your eyes and recite the Lord's Prayer. Do not open them again until sunrise. 10. You are allowed to leave at exactly 6 a.m., not a minute before. 11. Burn this paper at the end of your shift. Do not take it home. Do not photograph it. Do not speak of it. I read the rules 3 times before setting the clipboard down on the desk in the reception booth. At first, I laughed. It all sounded like some elaborate prank. Maybe the owner got bored and decided to mess with new hires. But there was something about the way that man looked at me, serious, hollow, exhausted. If it was a joke, he was playing it damn well. The reception booth was small, no bigger than a walk-in closet. There was a single desk with a logbook, a lamp, a microwave, and a small coffee maker. An old security monitor sat in the corner showing 4 camera feeds: the parking lot, the lobby, the garage bay, and the back hallway. The first few hours were dead silent. I had brought a paperback novel with me and was halfway through the second chapter when the first car pulled in. It was just after 10:30 p.m. It was a beat-up Buick, dark blue, with cracked headlights. I stood up, smoothed out my shirt, and opened the sliding window to greet the driver. He stepped out of the car slowly. I noticed right away that the vehicle didn't have a license plate, neither front nor back. I swallowed and remembered the second rule. Ask no questions. Offer black coffee. "Evening," I said, my voice a little shaky. "Trouble with the car?" He didn't speak. He just nodded once and looked toward the waiting room. "Feel free to wait inside. I'll log your arrival." He nodded again, silently, and stepped past the window into the reception area. I watched him closely as he sat down on the torn vinyl couch, hands folded neatly on his lap. I brewed a cup of black coffee and brought it to him. He took it without a word. The whole thing was unnerving, like a scene from a movie you don't remember watching. He stayed for exactly 13 minutes. Then, without speaking, he stood, walked back out to the car, and drove off. I stared after him, feeling cold in my bones, even though the booth was warm. At 2:14 a.m., the payphone outside started to ring. I almost jumped out of my chair. It was loud, sharp, echoing through the stillness of the night. I looked at the sheet again. Rule number 3, do not answer it. It rang 27 times before stopping. At 2:58 a.m., something knocked from inside the parts locker. It was a slow, deliberate knock, 3 times, then silence, then 3 more knocks. I froze. I could see the locker on the security feed. Nothing moved, but the sound was undeniable. I turned up the monitor volume, nothing but static. The knocking stopped after what felt like 10 minutes. I started to think maybe I really had lost it. Maybe this place was messing with my head. But then, just after 4:07 a.m., I heard footsteps on the roof. Not the light kind. These were heavy, rhythmic, like something with weight and purpose. Then the sound changed. It wasn't footsteps anymore. It was hooves. I clutched the rule sheet tightly, my knuckles white. Rule number 8, do not acknowledge it. The footsteps circled the roof 3 times. Then silence. I didn't move for 20 straight minutes. The rest of the shift passed without incident. At exactly 6 a.m., the garage lights flickered twice, and I heard a soft chime from somewhere in the back. I stood up, burned the rule sheet in the metal trash bin using my lighter, and walked out to my car. The morning sun was just beginning to peek through the horizon, and everything looked so normal it made me feel like I dreamed the entire thing. But as I drove away, glancing at the garage in my rearview mirror, I noticed something that made my heart drop. The red neon open sign wasn't on anymore, but something else was. Behind one of the garage bay windows, scrawled in dark red letters, was a message I hadn't noticed before. 1 down, 5 more to go. The next day I told myself not to go back. I even opened the classifieds, started rechecking old job listings, even thought about calling my cousin who offered me a couch to crash on in Cleveland. But when 5 p.m. rolled around, I found myself packing a thermos of coffee and heading back toward Route 666 like I was under a spell. Somewhere deep down, I told myself I needed answers, or maybe I just needed the money badly enough to ignore the panic scratching at the back of my mind. The garage looked the same when I arrived. Same rusted sign, same blinking neon glow, same overgrown weeds that whispered with the evening wind. But there was something in the air now, a weight. The kind that settles in the lungs and makes it harder to breathe. The moment I stepped into the reception booth, I noticed it waiting for me. Another clipboard. This time the page wasn't yellowed. It looked brand new, crisp, like it had been typed and printed only hours earlier. I picked it up with trembling fingers. Night 2. Additional instructions. 1. Do not attempt to access the locker room between 1 a.m. and 1:45 a.m. The door will be unlocked, right, but it is not for you. 2. You may notice your reflection moving out of sync after midnight. Do not acknowledge it. Turn off all reflective surfaces if possible. 3. If a child walks in and asks for a mechanic named Uncle Johnny, respond with, "He's working on the engine in the back." Nothing more. 4. The black cat may return. Do not feed it. Do not let it inside. If it stares at you through the glass, close your eyes until it leaves. 5. You may find a tooth on your desk after 3:33 a.m. Leave it alone. It will be collected. 6. Do not speak to the man cleaning the vending machine. He is not staff. These weren't rules anymore. They were warnings dressed in polite instruction. I sat at the desk and glanced nervously at the security monitors. They flickered briefly as I powered them on, showing the same 4 views of the place. I couldn't help but feel like I was being watched from all angles, so even when the lot was empty. The first visitor didn't show up until almost midnight. It was another car without plates, a silver sedan this time, windows tinted darker than legal. I did as I had the night before, no questions. I offered black coffee through the slot and watched as the man, dressed in an old military jacket, sat in the same chair as the previous customer. He said nothing. Just sat with the coffee in hand, staring ahead as if waiting for something that never came. At 12:26 a.m., the reflection in the booth's side window shifted. I didn't move at first. I assumed it was the angle, maybe a trick of the dim lighting. But then it tilted its head in the wrong direction. I was still, frozen. My body wanted to look, to inspect, to confirm what I just saw, but the rule was clear. Don't acknowledge it. I turned off the small lamp beside the window, dimming the space so no reflection could be seen. When I looked back at the window, it was gone. Just a regular pane of dusty glass again. At exactly 1:02 a.m., I heard the sound of metal hinges groaning down the hallway. I glanced at the monitor. The locker room door was open. I leaned closer to the screen, heart thudding. Nothing moved, but something felt off. The air inside the booth felt colder, heavier. A weird hum filled my ears, the kind of static you get just before a storm, even though the skies were perfectly clear. I resisted the urge to get up. The rule was simple: don't go to the locker room, so I didn't. Instead, I watched. For the next 40 minutes, the camera feed from the locker room flickered. Once, the lights inside turned red. Another time, the feed went black for 5 seconds. I counted every one, and when 1:45 a.m. struck, the door closed by itself on camera with a sharp snap. No explanation, no person, just a door that no longer needed to be open. I wiped the sweat from my forehead, trying to pretend this wasn't real. At 2:11 a.m., a black cat jumped up onto the reception window ledge. It stared at me through the glass with wide golden eyes. It didn't blink, didn't meow, just stared. I shut my eyes, every muscle in my body tight. I counted to 30, then 40. When I finally looked again, the cat was gone. But a single black paw print remained on the outside of the glass. It was still wet, like it had just been placed there. Then came 3:33 a.m. I didn't notice the tooth at first. I was sipping my coffee, eyes scanning the monitors for movement, when I noticed something white near the edge of the keyboard. It wasn't there before. It was a molar. Human, fresh. Tiny traces of blood along the root. My hand twitched. I wanted to flick it away, drop it in the trash, pretend it hadn't been placed there. But the rule was clear: leave it alone. So I did. I moved the keyboard over gently and pretended the thing wasn't staring up at me like a warning. Around 4:12 a.m., a man appeared in the waiting room out of nowhere. I didn't hear the door open. Didn't see him on the lot feed. He was kneeling in front of the vending machine, scrubbing it with a towel soaked in something dark. He was dressed in a blue janitor's outfit with no name tag. Bald head, pale skin. I reached for the intercom button, but froze. Rule 6, don't speak to the man cleaning the vending machine. He kept wiping for at least 15 minutes, slow, repetitive strokes, like he was washing away blood. Then he stood up, stared directly into the booth window, smiled once, and vanished. Just gone. No sound, no exit, nothing. I nearly screamed, but something inside me held back. Fear makes you quiet in places like this. It silences you, forces you to hide inside yourself, and makes your heart beat louder than the world around you. Just before dawn, I heard the door creak. Not the main entrance. The garage door. Rule number 9. My head snapped toward the monitors. The garage bay door was lifting slowly, and I hadn't touched it. My heart leapt to my throat as I scrambled from my chair. 12 seconds. I shut my eyes and started muttering the Lord's Prayer under my breath, stumbling over the words in panic. I don't know what came through that door, but I heard it. Something slithering. Wet, heavy, dragging. I kept my eyes shut until I heard the metal door slam shut again. When I opened my eyes, the monitors were full of static. It wasn't until 6 a.m. that the flickering stopped. The red neon sign blinked twice and went dark. I stood trembling and searched the booth for a lighter. The clipboard with the rules was gone, but in its place, on the desk beside the molar, was a single white card. Typed in the same font as before, Night 2 survived. 4 more remain. Don't get curious. I left the garage without speaking a word, and yet as I drove down the silent stretch of Route 666, past the abandoned motels and rotting cornfields, I could swear I saw that same black cat sitting on the hood of my car in the reflection of the windshield. Waiting, watching, smiling. By the time night 3 came around, I stopped pretending I had control. Something about that place was warping me, pulling me deeper, like a drain you don't notice until your feet are already off the floor. I didn't sleep much the day after my second shift. I kept waking up in cold sweats, dreaming of static-filled monitors and glowing golden cat eyes. I told myself this would be the last night. I even said it out loud in the mirror as I brushed my teeth, like if I said it enough, I could convince myself to quit. But at 5:15 p.m., I was already in the car, heading back down Route 666 like a moth to a bonfire. The garage looked the same, dead grass, flickering neon sign, rust-stained siding, but the air felt different, thicker. And as I walked across the gravel lot to the reception booth, I swore I heard something whisper my name from the cornfield across the road. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to see what was hiding in that dust-colored stalk. Inside the booth, another clipboard waited. Fresh rules, fresh dread. Night 3, temporary protocols. 1. You may see a version of yourself standing outside the booth. Do not open the door. Do not speak to it. Do not make eye contact. The toolbox in the corner must remain closed. If you find it open, shut it immediately and say, "This is not yours." 3. Between 1:11 a.m. and 1:23 a.m., the lights may flicker. If they do, remove your shoes and do not speak until they stabilize. 4. If a woman with a green umbrella enters and offers you a ride home, politely decline and lock the inner door. Do not unlock it until you hear 3 distinct knocks from the back hallway. 5. A vehicle with shattered windows may arrive after 3 a.m. If the driver bleeds from the mouth but smiles at you, ask for their name and write it backward in the logbook. Burn the page at dawn. 6. At any point, you may hear your mother's voice calling you from the garage bay. Your mother is not here. Do not respond. By now, I didn't even flinch reading the list. What caught me off guard was what wasn't there. No 1 down, 5 to go. No snide warnings, just rules. Instructions for surviving what the night would bring. I taped the page to the wall beside the light switch and took my seat, eyes glued to the monitor feeds. At 11:47 p.m., I saw myself. At first, I thought it was a reflection again, like night 2. But the figure on the monitor wasn't mimicking my movements. It was just standing by the booth door, staring up at the glass, wearing the same clothes, same posture, same expression. I turned slowly toward the real door, and there I was, standing in the dark, hands in the jacket pockets, my head tilted ever so slightly like I'd forgotten how to hold it properly. I locked eyes with myself before I remembered the rule. I yanked my head away. Too late. The version of me outside smiled. But it wasn't a natural smile. It was stretched, pulled too far across the face like a rubber mask trying to remember what skin feels like. I stood frozen for several minutes. I didn't dare speak. I didn't move. I just waited. Eventually, the thing that looked like me walked off into the dark. I didn't look to see where it went. At 12:39 a.m., the toolbox in the corner was open. I never heard it click, never saw it move. It was just open. Inside were tools I hadn't seen before. Rusted wrenches, bone-handled knives, a pair of pliers with what looked like hair caught in the hinge. I shut it with shaking hands and whispered, "This is not yours." The lid snapped shut like it had been waiting. At exactly 1:13 a.m., the lights began to flicker. I remembered the rule, pulled off my shoes, and stayed completely silent. The flickering lasted nearly 9 minutes, long enough for my toes to grow numb against the cold floor, long enough for me to hear something breathing from the ceiling vents. When the lights returned to normal, I didn't put my shoes back on. It felt wrong, like the room might punish me for moving too soon. Then at 2:22 a.m., a woman walked in. She wore a tan raincoat, and under one arm she held a green umbrella, even though the sky outside was clear. She smiled politely, the way strangers do on buses or in waiting rooms. "Long shift?" she asked softly, standing just inside the lobby. "Yeah," I replied automatically. Then I remembered. Rule 4. She gestured toward the lot. "My car's running. I could drop you off. You look tired." I forced a weak smile and shook my head. "No thanks. I'm all right." "You sure?" she asked, her tone remaining pleasant but pressing. I slowly reached for the inner door's lock and clicked it shut. Her smile faded, just a fraction, like a flicker in the eyes. "I wouldn't wait too long," she said. "Storm's coming." Then she left. I stared at the empty room, heart thumping against my ribs. For the next 10 minutes, I stood by the door, waiting. Finally, 3 distinct knocks echoed from the back hallway. Only then did I unlock the booth door. At 3:11 a.m., The shattered window car pulled in. It was a black SUV, dented on both sides, windshield cracked like spiderwebs. The man behind the wheel stepped out with a slow, almost elegant grace. He wore a suit that didn't quite fit and smiled with teeth too perfect to be real. Blood trickled down the side of his mouth. He walked to the window. "Evening," he said. I nodded slowly. "Can I get your name?" "Timothy," he answered. "Timothy Black." I opened the logbook and carefully wrote K. Calpo across the entry line. The moment I finished, he nodded approvingly, turned, and got back into his vehicle. It reversed out of the lot without headlights. The blood was still on the glass. At 4:45 a.m., I heard my mother's voice, soft, kind, humming a lullaby she used to sing when I was little. "Sweet dreams, my darling boy. Come here. I need you. I'm stuck. Help me." I clenched my fists and stared at the monitors. The garage bay feed showed nothing, but the voice kept calling, over and over, switching between lullaby and pleading. At one point, she screamed my name so loud, so broken, it made my knees shake, but I never moved, never answered. When 6 a.m. finally came, the monitors went black, the lights flickered off, the neon sign died. I reached for the logbook to tear out the page I had written in reverse and burn it as instructed, but the logbook was gone. In its place was another white card, same font as before. Night 3 complete. Your mind is bending. Let it. And just below that, in red ink, he's watching you now. I stood in the parking lot under the rising sun, unable to move. Something had changed. The wind felt too warm. The clouds looked artificial. I wasn't even sure the sunrise was real anymore. Then I noticed something scratched into the dirt near my car tires. 6 claw marks, long, deep, still fresh, as if something had been circling my car, waiting for me to come out. By night 4, I was no longer scared the way I used to be. Fear had mutated into something more primal, more animal. I didn't jump at noises anymore. I listened to them. I didn't flinch at shadows. I memorized their movement. The garage hadn't just changed how I saw things. It had changed what I believed was real. I no longer questioned if the rules were there to protect me. I now knew that they were the only reason I was still alive. The road to the garage seemed longer this time. The trees were different. Taller, darker, too dense for this part of Ohio. And I could swear the cornfields along Route 666 were now pulsing, like lungs inhaling dusk. When I parked outside, I saw something strange. The red neon open sign wasn't blinking. It was glowing steady, alive. It bathed the reception booth in crimson light, casting long, twitching shadows behind the window. I tried not to look at them directly. Some of them moved when I didn't. Inside, the air felt hotter than usual. There was a faint smell of oil, iron, and something more organic, like wet fur and decay. The clipboard was waiting as always. Night 4, standard reinforcements. 1. Do not answer the door between 12:40 a.m. and 12:55 a.m., even if someone is screaming for help. 2. If the clock hands begin spinning counterclockwise, turn the clock face toward the wall. Do not reset it. 3. At approximately 2:22 a.m., a man in a mechanic's jumpsuit may enter the waiting area. If he's missing his face, offer him a can of oil and say, "The engine's fine now." Do not look at his hands. 4. You may hear a chorus of voices chanting in the vents. If they begin to say your name, begin humming a song you haven't heard since childhood. Do not stop until they do. 5. If a customer tries to pay you in teeth, accept them. Place them in the red box beneath the desk. Lock the box and do not open it for any reason. 6. If you see a figure outside, hovering at least 4 feet above the ground, do not breathe until it's gone. I read the rules twice, then tore the page from the clipboard and pinned it beside last night's. I had brought a thermos of coffee, 2 flashlights, and a rosary tonight. I wasn't religious, but at this point, anything that made me feel human was worth clinging to. The first few hours were uneventful. At 12:43 a.m., the screaming began. It was distant at first, just soft, muffled cries like someone far off down the highway. But then it got closer, much closer. It was a woman, or maybe a girl, screaming, sobbing, banging on the front door of the reception booth. "Please help me. Someone's chasing me. Please, I'm bleeding." She pounded on the glass with both fists. I could see her outline through the foggy window, a shadow, a silhouette, but I didn't move. I just stared straight ahead, fists clenched, repeating the rule in my head. Do not answer. The banging turned into scratching, nails against glass, then bone against metal, then nothing. By 12:56 a.m., the air was still again. The moment I turned to look out the window, there was no one there, but long, deep red smears remained on the glass. I sat down again, hands shaking. The wall clock began to spin at 1:15 a.m. The minute hand whipped backward so fast it buzzed. The ticking became a low hum. I stood up and turned the entire clock toward the wall. Behind me, I heard something crawl across the floor. When I turned, there was nothing there. At 2:22 a.m., the door to the waiting room creaked open without a single sound from the bell. A man walked in, slow, limping steps. He wore a stained mechanic's jumpsuit. The patch over his heart said Carl, but he had no face, just smooth skin where his eyes, nose, and mouth should have been, like someone had molded his head from clay and never finished it. He stood by the front desk. I forced myself to grab the oil can from under the counter, the one I'd brought in just in case. I slid it to him through the tray. "The engine's fine now," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He tilted his head slowly, the way a curious dog does. His hands twitched, fingers curling like hooks. I didn't look at them. I kept my eyes on the floor until I heard the door creak again. He was gone. No footprints, no oil stains, no trace, only the faint smell of burnt rubber. I was sweating now, the kind of sweat that came from the soul, not the skin. At 3:01 a.m., the vents began to hum. Then the chanting began, low at first, foreign syllables, strange rhythms. Then words I recognized. Then my name. They whispered it like it was a secret, over and over. "Eli, Eli, Eli." I started humming without thinking. A tune from my childhood, something my mother used to play on the record player. I didn't even remember the lyrics, but the melody was there, buried in my bones. I hummed until my throat went dry. The voices didn't stop for 15 minutes. But they eventually faded, like breath on glass. And I was alone again, or close enough. At 3:45 a.m., a man in a pickup truck pulled into the lot. No license plate. Of course. He was bleeding from the temple, but smiling. When I offered help, he waved me off and tried to hand me something. A fistful of teeth. Some were human, some were not. I took them without blinking, put them in the red box beneath the desk, locked it with the rusted key taped underneath. His smile widened. Then he turned and got back into his truck, which vanished before it hit the road. No headlights, no sound, just gone. At 4:19 a.m., I saw something floating outside the booth. It wasn't a person. It had a shape, vaguely human, but it hovered above the gravel at least 4 feet in the air. Limbs too long, neck too thin, no face again, just drifting, watching, waiting. I held my breath and crouched behind the desk, eyes shut, lungs burning. I waited until my vision blurred, until my head throbbed, until it left. Then I gasped and fell forward onto the floor, sucking in cold air. I stayed there until the monitors flickered black. At 6 a.m., a soft chime echoed through the building. The neon sign shut off, and a note appeared on the desk, folded neatly in half. I didn't see who left it. I didn't hear footsteps. It was just there. I unfolded it with shaking hands, the same typewriter font. "You're adapting well. You no longer fear. That is progress." Beneath that was a new line, written in red. "The garage likes you. He wonders if you'll stay." I looked out the booth window one last time. The sunrise over the cornfields didn't look real anymore. Too perfect, too painted, as if someone had drawn it just for me. I didn't go home after night 4. I didn't even try. I drove aimlessly for a while, past ghost towns and closed gas stations, beneath telephone poles that stretched forever but carried no signal. My phone hadn't worked since night 2. The screen still lit up, still showed the time, but no bars, no apps, just an empty frame with the date stuck on the day I took the job. Eventually, I parked at a rest stop and sat there until sundown, watching the horizon bleed into itself. I wasn't sure who I was anymore. My hands didn't feel like mine. My thoughts didn't sound like me. It was like something was hollowing me out shift by shift and stuffing new rules where memories used to be. When I returned to the garage on night 5, the gravel crunched louder beneath my tires than usual. The sound echoed like bones snapping underfoot. The neon sign wasn't red anymore. It was a pale, pulsing white. And the word open flickered like it was trying to warn me off rather than welcome me in. I went inside anyway. The clipboard was already on the desk. This one was thicker. It held 2 pages this time. Night 5, final preparations. 1. There is no Rule 1 tonight. Rule 1 is missing. Do not attempt to remember what it was. 2. At 11:44 p.m., someone will knock exactly once. You must knock back once, no more, no less. 3. Between 12 and 12:30 a.m., a loud crash will come from the garage bay. Do not investigate. Instead, turn off the security monitor labeled Bay 3 and hum until the sound fades. 4. If you find photographs of yourself doing things you do not remember, burn them in the oil drum outside. Do not look at the backs of the photos. 5. The black cat will return. Tonight it may speak. If it offers you a deal, refuse. Refuse no matter how tempting. 6. Do not speak to the man who enters wearing your face. Sit perfectly still until he leaves. 7. If the power cuts out at 3:33 a.m., do not try to restore it. Wait exactly 7 minutes, then say aloud, "I know you're here." Then sit and listen. No matter what you hear, do not respond. 8. If the red phone rings before sunrise, do not answer. If it keeps ringing, place your hand over your heart and repeat the words, "Not mine, not mine, not mine." I pinned both sheets to the wall this time. I didn't sit down. I just stood there for a long while, breathing shallow, waiting for the booth to acknowledge me. It did. The clock above the window ticked once, even though I had removed the batteries. At 11:44 p.m., someone knocked once. It was sharp, firm, directly behind me, the back wall. I didn't turn around. I raised my fist and knocked back once. Silence. The air inside the booth shifted. I couldn't explain it. Like pressure changed, like the building was holding its breath. I sat. At 12 something exploded in the garage bay. A metal crunching shriek, as if a car had been torn in half. The floor shook. I turned off Bay 3's monitor and started humming. I hummed louder this time. It was the same tune from Night 3, but I didn't remember learning it. I wasn't sure it was even real. The noise faded after what felt like an hour, but was probably less than 10 minutes. When I turned the monitor back on, the bay was empty. But something was written across the floor in oil, or blood, or something worse. Who fixes you? At 12:51 a.m., I found the photographs. They weren't there before. They were just suddenly on the desk. A stack of 10 or 11, all black and white. Me standing in places I had never been. Me speaking to people I didn't know. Me smiling in front of graves. Me covered in something dark and dripping, holding up something blurred out like the camera refused to capture it. The last photo was the worst. It was me sleeping at home. From above. From inside the room. The back of each photo had something written on it, but I didn't look. I didn't need to. I grabbed the lighter from my pocket, took the stack outside to the oil drum, and burned them all. As I watched them curl and shrivel into ash, the black cat appeared. It sat beside the drum, tail flicking, golden eyes glowing in the dark. "Do you want out?" it asked. The voice wasn't human, wasn't animal. It came from everywhere at once, behind me, inside me, beneath my skin. "You don't have to finish. He'd understand. You've done enough." My mouth was dry, my jaw clenched. I said nothing. The cat blinked slowly. "I could give you answers," it said. "I could make you whole again. Just say yes." "No," I whispered. The cat frowned. "Stupid choice," it muttered, then vanished into the tall grass like smoke on the wind. At 2:22 a.m., the man entered. He didn't knock. He didn't speak. He just stood in the waiting room staring. And it was my face, my eyes, my posture, my boots, my tired shoulders. Except he was clean, confident, calm, and his smile was full of teeth that weren't mine. I didn't move. I didn't blink. He stared for 6 minutes, then left. The moment he was gone, I fell forward and vomited into the trash can. There was nothing in my stomach, but something came out anyway. Black, tar-like liquid that hissed when it touched the floor. At exactly 3:33 a.m., the power cut out. All at once. The booth went pitch black. The monitors went dead. The clock stopped ticking. I checked the time on my phone, though it hadn't worked in days. The screen flickered once and displayed the right time, down to the second. I waited 7 minutes, then whispered, "I know you're here." Behind me, something moved. Something massive. It breathed like a dying engine. And then I heard them. Every voice I'd ever known. My parents, my old boss, exes, friends, strangers. All whispering things I never told anyone. Things they shouldn't know. I didn't answer. I just sat silent until the lights flickered back on at 3:40. When they did, the booth was spotless. No black tar, no photographs, no cat. The red phone on the wall began to ring at 5:55 a.m. It had never rung before. The sound was deep, old, mechanical. I didn't touch it. It rang 5 times, then 10. I pressed my palm against my chest and whispered, "Not mine, not mine, not mine." It stopped on the 13th ring, and then the sun rose. I didn't wait for a note this time, but one still appeared, folded neatly in my jacket pocket like it had been placed there hours ago. Typed in the usual font, "Only one night remains. You are becoming." And in red, "He is almost ready." I got in my car and stared at the steering wheel for a long time before turning the key. This was it. One more night. Then I would finally understand what I'd been protecting and what I'd really become. I didn't drive to the garage for my 6th and final night. My car wasn't there anymore. It was gone when I woke up. The keys still sat on the kitchen counter, but outside, the space in the driveway where the car should have been was just empty, like it had never existed. So I walked. It took me 4 hours to reach the outskirts of Route 666. I passed the cornfields, now gray and colorless, and noticed that the sky wasn't following me. Clouds stayed frozen in place. The sun didn't move. Time, I realized, had stopped obeying me. When I reached the garage, I saw that something was waiting. The neon sign no longer said open. It simply said inside. The lights in the garage were on, every single one of them. The gravel in the lot was soaked, fresh, dark, sticky. I didn't check what it was. I didn't need to. Inside the booth, no clipboard waited this time. No sheet of rules, no sarcastic notes, no instructions, just a blank journal, leather bound, no pen. When I sat down, the monitors lit up on their own, but they didn't show the lot or the lobby or the hallway. They showed me, not live footage, not surveillance. Remember, on one screen, I was 12 years old, watching my father leave for the last time. On another, I was 17, burying something in the woods behind my house, something wrapped in tarp, something that bled. On the third screen, I was sleeping, here, at the garage, except I'd never slept here, had I? Then the fourth monitor flickered and turned red. A voice came through, deep, metallic, rusted like old metal, and full of static. It said one word, "Begin." I opened the journal. Inside were pages and pages of writing, not mine, dozens of entries, each titled Night 1, Night 2, all the way to Night 6. Each entry detailed everything I had seen, thought, done, felt. I flipped to the final page. It was blank. Then a single line began to type itself across the paper. "He is almost awake. All you must do now is watch." Suddenly, the lights in the building dimmed. The monitors began showing live feeds again, but this time there were other people. One was sitting in the waiting room. Another was walking down the hallway. A third was knocking on the garage door. They all looked like me, different versions, younger, older, some thinner, some heavier. One was missing an eye. Another wore a bloody jumpsuit. All of them doing what I had done on previous nights, following the rules, making the same mistakes. Then I realized the truth. I wasn't the first. I wasn't even the original. I was a shift, a version, a copy in a long chain of copies. The journal wasn't for me to fill in. It was mine to complete. I wrote a single sentence on the last page, almost in a trance. "He is ready now." And as I closed the journal, I felt the ground shake, not like an earthquake. No, like a heartbeat. The lights in the garage flickered. The walls pulsed. The back wall began to bleed. And from the center of the garage bay, something rose. Tall, metallic, dripping with oil and bone. It looked human at first, but it had no skin. Its face was an empty void that blinked. Its limbs were made of parts, tools, wires, bones, scrap metal. And at its center, embedded deep inside its chest, was the red phone. Still ringing. The thing stepped forward. One foot crushed the entire vending machine. Another shattered the clock. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I stood up and walked into the garage bay. The creature tilted its head. From its chest, the phone stopped ringing. A voice spoke through it. My own voice. "Welcome, Eli. You did well." I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just nodded. The creature reached toward me, not to hurt me, to hand me something. A clipboard. On it was a single sheet, blank. Then words began to type. Night 1. Assigned Unit of 32. Obey all instructions, observe and report. Do not interfere with the arrival. Notes. This copy achieved successful completion rate, higher cognitive retention than units number 11 through 31. Memory decay stable. Recommend Unit 32E for permanent integration. The creature opened its chest cavity. Inside was a seat, a nest, a cockpit. Wires curled like veins, teeth hung from strings. A second clipboard waited inside, and I knew what I was supposed to do. I stepped inside the thing that had been watching, waiting, growing for 6 nights. I sat in the chair. The door closed. The last thing I saw was the garage folding itself up behind me, collapsing like a box being packed away for shipment. Then blackness. Then a voice, loud and clear. Unit 33 is now active. Initiate new receptionist. Restart night 1. Somewhere far away on a dusty road that doesn't exist on maps, a new help wanted ad has gone live. Help wanted. Night receptionist. $22. Must not ask questions. Must follow all rules. And somewhere else, a tired, desperate soul clicks on it. Their journey begins. Mine has ended. Or maybe I've just become the next rule to follow.